Okay, thank you. Um, so, the current mediascape requires a deep inquiry on the use of the media, the old and new media, in many fields, and in particular in the educational realm. Tools like computer, consoles, smartphones, extended TV, MP3 readers, photo and video cameras are of common use today and give rise to many applications which can change the way we get in touch with each other, the way we can communicate, learn and teach. In our culture, the remote and mediated communication has become increasingly relevant. In order to have an idea of the extent of this process, which occurred in less than 200 years, a very short time in comparison to the human evolution, let's think to the communication technologies which were available by mid of the 19th century and to today's many opportunities, synchronous and communications like cellular and or plain telephony, IP-based communication like Skype and chats, and asynchronous communications like email, fora, blogs, social networks, and so on, which can be very inexpensive. This evolution has many reasons. Among them, the extraordinary growth of the calculation power played a pivotal role since the microprocessors are at the heart of all the devices and tools that people use for work and leisure. This growth is not expected to stop or reduce also for the introduction of new technologies. The expert thinks that the exponential-like growth of the calculation power will hold at least for a decade from now, possibly using different computing technologies, multi-core, multiprocessing, clustering, and also optical technologies, which have already been demonstrated, and quantum-based technologies. But this is only one side of the evolution. The other side is a diminishing of the calculation costs. This graph, in some ways peculiar to the previous, shows that the power calculation is becoming cheaper and cheaper, allowing the use of the microprocessors in everyday tools. Moreover, since the microprocessors' costs are continuously lowering and chips do not add significant costs to the object which they can be added to, chips, and often dozens of chips, are embedded into any common objects and tools: cars, watches, washers, toasters, phones, TV, MP3 readers, toys, photo and video camera, household application, DVD, and so on. And chips are also in artificial prostheses or are implanted in human bodies. A population of obscure and obedient entities which entirely work in a discrete and invisible way. A strong evolution also occurred in the image-making techniques, like photography, for instance. Before the mass diffusion of photography, only a small number of people, an elite, was able to create images. They had the ability, but also the power, to generate images. In the 19th century, Baudelaire considered the rapid diffusion of photography as a bane, and in 1859, in the Salon des 1859, published inside the Revue Française, he stated that if photography is allowed to supplement art in some of its functions, it will soon have supplanted or corrupted it altogether, thanks to the stupidity of the multitude which is its natural ally. It is time, then, for it to return to its true duty, which is to be the servant of the sciences and arts, but the very humble servant, like printing or shorthand, which have neither created nor supplemented literature. A statement which shows, on one side, the aristocratic ideas that Baudelaire had of art, and on the other side, that he had perfectly understood that photography was an emerging mass medium. Today, after roughly 150 years, everybody can easily and cheaply create images with many devices, like cameras, computers, smartphones, webcams, for many needs and applications. Photography has become that Brazil without walls that McLuhan defined in his most famous book. Today, people can create videos in an easy and economic way, a common task that only 20 years ago was very difficult and expensive to achieve, and more, people can share online their videos, showing them to millions of other people. For instance, a sharp example here is the case of Fan 2, a Korean guitarist whose guitar performance was viewed in YouTube by more than 81 million people, and he became a star. In the remote audiovisual communication, in real time, some kind of revolution happened. 10 years ago, it was a complex and expensive issue that only the TV organization could manage. Today, a video conference call can be made with cheap and personal tools which everybody can manage, just like PC, smartphones, wired and wireless connections, and with very cheap or free applications. All this evolution is opening up a wide bunch of unprecedented communication possibilities, which have changed and are changing the way people live, work, study, and learn. Today, people are experts in communication, are information producers, gatherers, disseminators, sharers, modifiers, and storers. Today, an increasing part of the knowledge on the world we live in is achieved through the media, and a relevant role in this trend is performed by the remote communications, both synchronous and asynchronous. People can instantly, inexpensively, and easily communicate in remote, and an increasing part of the communication is in remote. What for centuries has been the dream of the political and economic power, of the governments, of the inventors, and of the magicians is here and cheap today. I think one of the words to reflect on today is speed. Indeed, speed is a very questionable and controversial word, which often reminds to environmental, ethical, as well as sustainability and pollution-related issues. In 1997, in Amsterdam, I attended to a yearly event called Doors of Perception that was very popular at that time, which was organized by the National Design Institute, and it was directed by John Zachara. In the 1997 edition was devoted to discuss about the topic of speed. And when I was back home, I wrote an article for Domus magazine where I wrote that we need speed, as this term is generally defined, in order we do not compete as losers with nature, to be understood equally generally, and even to have the illusion of immortality. What we do require are concrete projects for this speed. The debate around speed arose in the last decade, regarding some particular application or sides of the human culture, concerning more the matter than the information. For instance, it is very stigmatized the sense of the cars, which were originally built to speed up traveling and were celebrated by the futurists in the beginning of the 20th century. But today, instead, especially in the cities, they allow going slower and slower and are a polluting cause. Anyway, speed is in the human culture since the acquisition of the symbolic ability that produces a huge acceleration in the process of creating more and more complex tools and artifacts. Let's see some examples. In the Stone Age, from the first simple splitters to the first axis, which also more refined they apparently are not so different, there is a gap of 1 million years. 1 million years is a time which is simply inconceivable. Our ancestors probably lived in a culture with simple, very rare and fragile updates of their technologies. Instead, between the discovery of fire and today's many different ways to use the fire-based energy, passed 400,000 years. A relevant acceleration happened inside the information and the communication realms. For 1,000 years until the invention of the telegraph, the speed of people, animals, things, and information has approximately the same order of magnitude. The remote communication in real time was a dream of the government, and even projects based on telepathy were funded. In roughly 1 century and a half, a time which is very small if compared to the human culture history, we gave an extraordinary boost to the information speed. In fact, today, people, animals, and things can go very quick, but the information can roughly reach the speed of light, that is being more than 500,000 times quicker than people, animals, and things. And this picture shows a calculation of the speed boost. We can find an acceleration inside the media realm too. In the USA, The radio requires 38 years to reach 50 million people. The television needed 13 years, the cable 8 years, and the internet 5. And inside the internet-based communications, with an international target, Facebook required less than 4 years to reach 50 million users, while Skype took roughly 2 years. So the remote and mediated communication has become increasingly relevant. But this process, which opened up the contemporary real-time of communication era, caused a reorganization and even a decadence of the material senses. In fact, media mainly mean visual and acoustic media. For instance, the olfactory information cannot be transferred in today's remote and mediated communication. It can only be indirectly and synesthetically evoked through the visual and acoustic channels. The smell pertains the body reality, the status, in such a strict and powerful way that humans invented the perfumes and the deodorants in order to divert, expand, or remove the body's odor and to enhance its symbolic dimension, so escaping that limiting and immediate condition. Smell and touch rely both on direct and short distance or contact communication. Hence, we must conclude that we accepted to communicate more rapidly over greater distance in an increasingly affordable and maybe economic way, but in exchange for an impoverished communication. Moreover, it should be noted that, despite the hegemony of the senses of distance, sight and hearing, the so-called superior senses, in the Western culture, the senses of proximity and contact, smell and touch, are considered more relevant in relation to reality. Touching is believing instead of seeing is believing, like St. Thomas, who touched the wounds of Jesus to be sure he was real. We trust more in the information we get with the sense of touch. Maybe a further note should be devoted to the interactive communication. In the human communication, as well as in the communication of the living organisms, interactivity is a rule and not the exception, as the media would often claim, and it is not only technology-based. Before the use of images, adornments, and later writings, the human symbolic communication was mainly direct and interactive. With the achievement of the mediated communication, images in general and writings, for the first time humans register the knowledge outside the body and invent the non-interactive mediated communication. In the history of the symbolic communication, this is a real exception. But the interactive communication is so important that in the present era we devise the technologies to render interactive also the mediated communication, bringing it back to the main realm of the interactive communication. As a corollary, this picture shows that the interactive communication is more effective than the other forms. This graph gives also a reason why the door-to-door sales, despite being a drudgery and a primitive tool, are still the most effective sales system. This graph also reveals why the non-interactive media crave to appear as interactive, with some kind of tricks we know well: the letters to the director in the newspapers, the presence of the public in the studios of the TV programs, and so on. And finally, I think this graph is relevant in the education realm. I end my presentation spending a few words on Noema, the web magazine which is among the organizers of this event. Noema is a non-profit web magazine devoted to culture and new technologies, interrelation and influences. It was born for educational reasons in 2000, so in 2010, today, we celebrate our small anniversary, 10 years, as well as the 20th anniversary of my university teaching. Noema's advisors board can count on Giovanni Anceschi, Roy Escott, Louis Beck, Valerio Eletti, Franz Fischnaller, Marina Grzinic, Giuseppe Longo, and Franco Toriani. Among Noema's educational projects, I want to mention here the eLab, a learning lab, which was born in 2002 as a teaching platform to collaborate. The eLab is online for the courses which need a learning system to share material to confront on the topic and improve their teaching activities. We provide this service for free, and since 2002, the e-learning lab has been hosting 35 university and academic courses. The edu list, which gathers information about academic courses, masters and PhDs on art, sciences and technologies, a project in collaboration with Yasmin, a mailing list co-sponsored by UNESCO, which is a network of artists, scientists, engineers, theoreticians and institutions promoting communication and collaboration in art, science and technology around the Mediterranean Rim. Noema is based on a previous experience, web experience in late 1994, Magnet, which was originally born as a BBS magazine in March 1994. In this screenshot, we can find some of the participants to the always already new event today, who seems are still interested and keen on culture and new technology. Thank you for your attention.